Hello everyone, today I will continue sharing the story about the single mother, Diệu Hân. I wish you all a joyful time watching this video. After a labor full of tension yet happiness, the second baby cried out healthily upon birth. The delivery room burst into joy. Seeing Hân lying exhausted yet still smiling, Tan felt his heart overflow with happiness. He held his wife's hand tightly and whispered, "You did so well, from now on everything is on me. All you need to do is rest." A few days later, when the doctor confirmed that both mother and baby were stable, Tan carefully prepared everything to bring Hân and the baby home. He took care of every little detail, arranging the bedroom, tidying up the space to keep it airy, and asking his mother to prepare nutritious meals for Hân. The car slowly rolled along, carrying the small family back to their familiar home. On the way, Hân leaned against Tan's shoulder, cradling the baby in her arms, her eyes shimmering with emotion. One hand on the steering wheel, Tan kept his other hand gently on his wife's shoulder, as if to give her strength and reassurance. When they arrived, little Tom, their first child, was already waiting at the door. Seeing the tiny newborn in his mother's arms, he exclaimed excitedly, "Mom's home! I have a sibling now!" Laughter filled the house. Warmth and peace spread throughout the little home. Hân was gently guided to her room to rest, while Tan busied himself with chores, yet his face still glowed with contentment. In that moment, Hân closed her eyes, silently knowing she had a steady shoulder to lean on, the simplest yet most complete kind of happiness. In the first days after returning home, the family entered a new chapter of life. Each night the baby's cries echoed, making the house livelier than ever. Though tired, Tan always took the initiative to wake up with his wife. He prepared milk, changed diapers, and rocked the baby to sleep, giving Hân more time to rest. Watching her husband awkwardly yet patiently handle the baby, Hân's heart warmed with both tenderness and gratitude. Little Tom was also thrilled about his role as the big brother. He ran around the crib, sometimes reaching his tiny hand to gently stroke the baby's cheek, whispering, "Be good, okay? Big brother Tom is here." At those moments, Hân smiled with pride, realizing her once playful boy was now learning to care for and protect his sibling. Grandmother also stayed for a few weeks to help. Each meal was carefully prepared with nourishing dishes for Hân. She was thoroughly cared for, free from chores, focusing only on resting and breastfeeding her baby. The little house was filled with laughter and the warmth of family love. Though there were still sleepless nights, Hân knew it was this sharing and affection that gave her strength to overcome the postpartum stage. Sometimes, Tan looked at his wife and children and sighed softly in bliss. "Perhaps this is the most perfect dream of my life." Today was unlike any other day. The baby suddenly became fussy, crying non-stop. The sharp, prolonged wails filled the house with worry. Though exhausted, Hân still tried to comfort her child, rocking, walking back and forth, whispering soothing words, but nothing seemed to work. Tears welled in her eyes, torn between pity for her baby and fear that she wasn't gentle enough to calm him down. Seeing this, Tan immediately stepped in. He gently took the baby into his arms, rocking slowly while humming a lullaby. His deep, steady voice seemed to soften each hiccup. After a while, the baby's cries weakened, his eyelids drooping until he finally fell asleep in his father's embrace. Tan let out a sigh of relief and turned to Hân with a reassuring smile. "Rest now, I'll take care of him." At first, Tom panicked too, running around helplessly. But then, he took a small towel to wipe the sweat off his mother's forehead and whispered, "Don't worry, Mom. Big brother Tom will help take care of the baby." In that moment, Hân clearly felt the change in both her husband and her eldest son. Tan had become more patient, more mature than ever before. And little Tom, once carefree, was now showing concern and a protective heart for his mother and sibling. Despite the exhausting nights, the bond within the family only grew stronger. Yet happiness was short-lived. In the following days, the baby's condition did not improve, it grew worse. He cried even more, fed less, grew thinner, his pale face fueling Han and Tana's deepest fears. One night, while the whole house slept, the baby suddenly screamed in distress, his breathing rapid and shallow. Han held him close, her heart tightening as tears streamed down her cheeks. Tan rushed them to the hospital, driving anxiously while trying to reassure her. "Stay calm, the doctors will know what to do. Our baby will be okay." In the back seat, Tom sat silently, his eyes swollen with tears, his tiny hands clutching his mother's shirt. He no longer chattered as usual. Instead, he prayed softly, "Please, little brother, don't leave me." In the emergency room, Han collapsed onto a chair, her heart crushed. Tan held her trembling hand, though he himself was shaking. The wait for the doctor's news became the longest, heaviest moments of their lives. The cold hospital corridor, the harsh white neon lights, the hurried footsteps of nurses, and the rattling of metal carts, all of it pressed heavily on their already strained hearts. At last, the doors swung open. The doctor stepped out, his weary face shadowed by grim eyes. Sitting across from them, he spoke slowly, each word cutting like a blade. "Your baby's condition is critical. We have to move him to intensive care and place him on a ventilator. You must prepare yourselves." At those words, Han's legs gave way. She sank onto the icy floor, covering her tear-soaked face with trembling hands. Her sobs echoed down the hallway, drawing sympathetic glances from passers-by. Tan tried to stay composed, but his bloodshot eyes betrayed the fear he held inside. He knelt down, wrapped his arms around his wife, holding her tight as if to lend her strength. His voice cracked, trembling. "I'm so sorry. If I could, I'd trade places with him. I wish it were me instead of our child." Behind those doors, their tiny baby lay connected to tubes, monitors, and a ventilator. His fragile body shook, his tiny chest rising and falling in sync with the machine. Each drawn-out beep-beep from the monitor tore through the suffocating air, a grim reminder that his fragile life was dangling between existence and oblivion. Outside, Tom sat quietly in his grandmother's lap, his innocent eyes fixed on the fogged window. Normally so lively, he now seemed uncharacteristically still. His lips trembled as he whispered, soft yet heartbreaking, "Please hold on, little brother. I'm waiting for you to come back and play with me." Hearing her son's plea, Han broke down, sobbing harder as she clutched him. Between her sobs, she tried to soothe him. "Your brother will come back to you. Be strong, my love, trust mommy." That night, the hospital glowed under relentless lights. Outside, a gentle rain fell, as if echoing the sorrow of this small family. None of them closed their eyes. Han leaned on Tana's shoulder, her hands clasped tightly together, lips moving in desperate prayers for a miracle. Tan sat in silence, his hollow eyes fixed on the ICU doors, listening to every sound of the machines beyond, the clang of metal, the hiss of artificial breath, the faint, fragile heartbeat of a child caught between life and death. The long corridor drowned in silence, leaving only fear, helplessness, and boundless love wrapping tightly around their hearts. Dawn was breaking, pale light filtering through the hospital window, casting a grayish glow across the corridor. Exhausted after a sleepless night, Han rested her head on Tana's shoulder, her swollen eyes still heavy with tears. But before she could close them, a piercing, drawn-out alarm suddenly erupted from the ICU. Beep! Both Han and Tan jolted, hearts clenched in terror. They rushed toward the doors as doctors and nurses hurried inside. The atmosphere instantly shifted to one of urgency and chaos. Hands pressing frantically against the baby's tiny chest, machines blaring, urgent shouts of the medical team filling the air. Han's legs buckled beneath her, trembling uncontrollably, yet she cried out in desperation, "Please save my baby. I beg you, please save my child." Tan tried to hold her up, but his own hands were ice-cold, his heart pounding wildly as though it would burst. Moments later, silence fell. The doctor stepped out, slowly pulling down his mask. His eyes were heavy, his voice low as he bowed his head. "We did everything we could. But your baby didn't make it. My condolences to your family." The words sliced through Han's world like a knife. She rushed inside, cradling her child's lifeless body. His tiny frame had gone cold, his pale skin still, his breath gone. Her anguished cries tore through the hall. "My baby, don't leave me. Please don't go, my child." Her wails echoed down the corridor, drawing people to a halt, their faces lowered in silent grief. Tan collapsed to his knees, wrapping trembling arms around both wife and child. His once strong shoulders shook violently as hot tears streamed onto Han's tangled hair. Biting his lip, he sobbed like a broken child. "I'm sorry. I couldn't protect our baby." Outside, little Tom sat in his grandmother's arms, too young to grasp the brutal truth. All he saw was his mother and father crying, everyone in pain. His round eyes glistened with tears as he whispered softly, "Grandma, is my brother just sleeping? When will he wake up to play with me?" The grandmother hugged him tighter, unable to speak, turning away to hide her own tears. The stark white hospital room became an endless void of sorrow. Han's cries intertwined with Tana's choked sobs, forming a lament that would scar their hearts forever. That day etched itself as a wound that would never heal, a loss too great, a pain too merciless. Yet in that devastation they clung tighter to each other, knowing only love and unbreakable unity could help them endure the dark days ahead. On the day of the funeral, even the sky seemed to mourn, heavy, gray, and oppressive. Cold winds swept across the yard, rustling the white mourning cloths. At the front of the house lay the tiny coffin, covered with a white shroud, heartbreakingly simple. White wreaths lined the yard, incense smoke curling thick into the air, blending with the sobs of grieving relatives. Han collapsed before the coffin, disheveled, frail hands clutching the lid as if letting go would mean losing her child forever. Her voice was hoarse from crying, yet her screams still pierced the silence. "My child, how could you leave me so soon? I never got to hold you fully. Never heard you call me mother." Villagers had to hold her upright, but each time she fainted and came to, she rushed back, wailing uncontrollably, chest heaving, breath broken. Her swollen, tear-stained face was a sight too painful for anyone to witness without breaking down themselves. Beside her, Tan had grown gaunt in just a few days, his eyes hollow as though his soul had vanished. He tried to be strong for his wife, yet his silent tears betrayed him. The man once steadfast against life's storms now crumbled before this cruel reality, clinging helplessly to Han's trembling shoulders, whispering futile words of comfort. At the edge of the yard, Tom stood in his oversized white mourning robe, his innocent face confused, eyes fixed on the tiny coffin. When his mother screamed, he too burst into tears, running to clutch her legs, crying out, "Brother, wake up! Don't sleep anymore. I'm waiting for you." The child's plea cut through everyone's heart like a blade. Women turned away, wiping their tears. The elders shook their heads, whispering prayers for the little soul to find peace. The funeral drum pounded slowly, each beat heavy like hammer blows to Han's heart. The mournful wail of trumpets spread through the village, mingling with the sobs of family and neighbors, painting a scene of grief too haunting to forget. The procession moved in silence along the path lined with white flowers. Nearly carried along, Han stumbled between two supporters, until at the graveside she broke free, throwing herself onto the fresh earth, screaming in despair. "My child, why can't I go with you? My child, the pain is unbearable." Her cries echoed across the fields, piercing the hearts of all who attended. Even the sky wept with a thin drizzle, raindrops blending with a mother's endless tears. For Han, this was not just a funeral, it was the cruelest scar of her life. To lose a tiny life, her own flesh and blood, her hope, her dream, was a pain beyond repair. In her hollow eyes, in her heartrending wails, everyone saw it. This wound would remain forever, etched into her soul until the end of her days. After the funeral, the house, once filled with cries, footsteps, and the presence of relatives, fell into a suffocating silence. No baby's voice, no tiny cradle by the window. Each time Han caught sight of the milk-stained blanket or the bottle left on the table, her heart ached unbearably. She would sit in silence for hours, eyes hollow, staring into nothingness. At night, she often woke with a start, her hands reaching out as if searching for her child, before breaking into sobs in the middle of her restless dreams. The loss became a shadow that smothered her heart, draining her strength day by day. Tom, though equally broken, tried to stay strong. He knew if they both collapsed, the family would have no anchor left. Every morning he quietly rose early, brewed a cup of tea for his wife, and left it on the table. When she sat dazed, he sat beside her, holding her hand without saying much, just letting her know he was there. Little Tom, too innocent to fully understand, felt the sorrow that wrapped around the house. He ran less, laughed less, and instead stayed close to his mother. Sometimes, he pressed small toys into her hand and whispered, "Don't be sad, Mommy. You still have me and Daddy." Those simple words brought tears back to Han's eyes, not only from grief but also from the warmth seeping in through her pain. Time passed. The wound never truly healed, but Tana's quiet devotion and Tom's innocent love became medicine for her broken heart. Though she carried a scar that would never fade, Han slowly learned how to live on, for the family that still needed her. In silence they held on to each other tightly, walking through the darkness of grief together, seeking the faint light ahead. In the days after the funeral, the house was unbearably empty. No baby's cries for milk, no midnight footsteps, only the vast, hollow quiet of absence. Han nearly collapsed under the weight of despair. She spoke little, ate little, her eyes sunken from sleepless nights. Each afternoon, when pale sunlight streamed through the window, she sat frozen for hours, her lifeless gaze searching the sky, as if hoping for a sign from the little angel who had left her. Tan watched quietly, heart-torn. He knew the pain was too deep to erase quickly, but he also understood that if Han kept drowning in despair, she would have no strength to carry on. So he chose to shoulder everything, hoping to bring her a sliver of peace. He took charge of all the housework, cooking, cleaning, caring for Tom. Each morning before Han stirred from her heavy sleep, he prepared porridge, brewed her tea, and left it by the window. He never pressured her, just gently pushed the bowl closer, whispering, "Eat a little, then rest. Your body needs strength. Tom still needs you." When he found her sitting in silence, he simply sat beside her. No grand words, no forced comfort, just his warm hand holding hers, his quiet presence stronger than any speech. Sometimes he reminded her of their past. The day they met beneath blooming flame trees, the day Tom was born and they fumbled through new parenthood, the evenings spent laughing together over little things. He believed that recalling these happy memories would remind her that alongside the pain, life still held things worth living for. On certain evenings, he took Han and Tom to the sea. He didn't speak much, just guided her along the wet sand, letting the waves and salty breeze soothe her heart. When tears streamed silently down her cheeks, he held her tighter, whispering, "I know you're hurting, but you're not alone. Tom and I still need you. Our family still needs you to keep going." Even Tom, though young, felt the heavy sadness. Following his father's lead, every night before bed he hugged his mother tightly, pressed his cheek to her shoulder, and whispered, "Mommy, I love you so much. I'll be good, so you won't be sad anymore." Those innocent words worked like a gentle balm. Her tears still fell, but not only from grief. Mixed within was a warmth that reminded her she still had reasons to live, to rise again after loss. Day by day, under Tana's patient care and Tom's pure love, the darkness of despair began to crack. Tiny rays of light slipped in, igniting fragile hope. The pain of losing her child would forever remain an unhealed scar. But within the embrace of her family, Han knew she still had the strength to go on. After months soaked in tears, little by little Han began to regain a trace of vitality. The pain was still there, but Tana's patience and Tom's innocent love were like a small steady flame warming her heart. One early morning, as sunlight slipped through the window, instead of sitting silently by the sill as usual, Han turned to her husband, her voice weak but firm. "Let me go to the market to buy some vegetables. It's been so long." Tan was startled for a moment, but his eyes lit up with hope. He quickly smiled and nodded. "All right, I'll go with you. Let's take Tom along too." The familiar path to the market suddenly felt like a different world. Vendors' voices called out, the smell of fresh produce, fish, meat, and fruit. All of it awakened senses Han had long ignored. She walked slowly past each stall, touched the bundles of leafy greens, and picked up a few ripe red tomatoes. For the first time in many months, a faint smile appeared on her lips. A small smile, but enough to lighten Tana's heart. That noon Han cooked again. The little kitchen, silent for so long, now bustled with the sound of chopping and the aroma of steaming soup spreading through the house. Tan sat at the table, eyes following her every familiar movement, feeling both tender and relieved, because he knew at last, Han was beginning to return to daily life. The family meal that day was simple: a bowl of sweet vegetable soup, a fragrant dish of braised fish, a plate of rustic pickled eggplant. But to Tan and Tom, it was the most delicious meal after endless days of grief. Tom ate eagerly, eyes shining as he exclaimed, "Mom's cooking is the best in the world." Han laughed through her tears. That laugh still carried a trace of sorrow, but it was a sign of a new beginning. At night, she no longer curled up in the dark, crying alone. Instead, she held Tom in her arms and told him the old fairy tale she once loved to share. His giggles filled the room, blending with her gentle lullabies, breathing warmth back into the little home. On another morning, Han decided to walk Tom to school herself. The boy trotted ahead, backpack bouncing, turning back now and then with a radiant grin, waving, "Hurry up, Mom." Standing at the school gate, watching his small figure disappear into the sea of students, Han felt a strange surge of emotion. She realized that though her loss had left a scar etched deep in her heart, she still had reasons to go on. Tom, Tan, and this family. On the way home, the morning sunlight streamed down on their porch, golden and warm, as if it could heal the soul. Han gently held Tana's hand. The two looked at each other in silence. No words were needed. Their eyes spoke of a deep understanding. They both knew. They had walked together through the darkest nights, and now a new journey was unfolding before them. The journey of healing. As the wounds of the heart slowly began to heal, one evening while sitting on the porch, Tan softly said to his wife, "How about we fix up the house, dear? The rainy season is coming, and the roof leaks in too many places. Besides, I think giving the house a new look could also be a way for us to start over." Han hesitated, her eyes flickering with sadness. She glanced around the house. The stained, patchy walls, the overgrown garden, the wooden frames already rotting. Somewhere in those corners still lingered memories of cradling her baby to sleep in the small crib. But after a moment of silence, she nodded gently. Deep down, she too longed for change, to open a new chapter for the family. In the days that followed, the quiet little house was filled with the sounds of hammers, saws, and brushes. Tan rolled up his sleeves, climbed onto the roof to replace each broken tile, sweat streaming down his face but determination shining in his eyes. Han cleaned the rooms, wiped the dust from the old windows, and discarded items that carried painful memories. Tom scurried about with a broom almost taller than himself, laughing. "I can help too, Mommy, Daddy, let me join." The family burst into laughter. Though he only managed to make more of a mess, his innocence filled the air with warmth. Moldy walls were covered in a fresh coat of white paint, brightening the entire room. The creaky old door was sanded smooth and brushed with a new warm brown. On the porch, Han placed pots of bougainvillea and chrysanthemums, simple yet resilient flowers, much like the strength she was nurturing inside herself. Each evening as the sun dipped behind the bamboo grove, the family sat on the porch, watching their familiar home transform. The breeze carried both the faint smell of paint and the fragrance of garden flowers. Wrapping his arm around his wife, Ton whispered, "See? Our house looks so much better now. Just like us. After the storm, peace will come again." Han leaned on his shoulder. Tears still fell, but they no longer felt heavy. Her eyes shone with serenity and hope. She understood that the pain of losing her child would remain a scar forever. But with Ton and Tom beside her, she could still rebuild happiness. The renovated house was no grand mansion, just a humble home. Yet within every new tile, every freshly painted wall, there was hope and determination. It was proof that even from sorrow one could begin again, stronger, more loving. On the night the work was completed, the family gathered around a simple meal. Outside, the full moon shone over the newly tiled roof. Inside, Tom's laughter echoed, blending with Tana's warm gaze and Han's gentle smile. For the first time in many months, the home was filled with pure, unbroken peace.
Xin chào mọi người, rất vui được gặp lại mọi người trong kênh của mình. Chúc mọi người có một ngày làm việc thật tràn đầy năng lượng và có một ngày mới an lành, hạnh phúc. Hiện tại thì kênh của mình đang chia sẻ những câu chuyện về những người mẹ đơn thân sinh sống ở Việt Nam. Rất hy vọng mọi người có thể ủng hộ kênh của mình nhiều hơn và đặc biệt là đóng góp những ý kiến cho mình ở dưới phần bình luận để mình cải thiện những video sau hay và hấp dẫn hơn. Và đặc biệt nếu mọi người yêu thích kênh của mình và yêu thích những câu chuyện của mình thì nhớ cho mình một like, một chia sẻ và nhớ bật chuông thông báo để nhận thông báo khi mình đăng video mới nhất để không bỏ lỡ những video nào. Và mọi người nhớ chia sẻ kênh của mình đến bạn bè để kênh của mình ngày càng phát triển nhiều hơn, đưa đến những video và những câu chuyện hay hơn cho mọi người xem. Cảm ơn mọi người đã xem hết video của mình nha. Xin chào và hẹn gặp lại.